the Star Wars galaxy at this time is at an extremely dark point, and the situation for a Jedi has never been worse than what it is for Cal. So he's looking for any way to affect change, to survive, to protect the things that he cares about, and that's becoming increasingly difficult. And I think Cal is at this point where he is even questioning how it is that he's supposed to proceed and what his next move should be. And so when an opportunity seemingly presents itself for him, he's going to throw himself at it full force. And yeah, that's kind of what launches us into our story. Yeah, I think that a lot of the story of the first game was what happens when you lose your family and how can you find a new one for yourself. With this story, we say, okay, you have a family, but when the circumstances around you change, what happens when you all have different opinions on how to deal with those circumstances? What happens when you put strain on a family and on your relationships? What does that look like for these characters and their interactions? And of course, over the course of our story, we find new characters, new interactions, and we really continue to open up, you know, Cal's relationships as well. There's a bunch of new characters that I really like what they do to shift the kind of the dynamic in the story. And in our first story, we had someone who was kind of a boy becoming a man. He doesn't have a safety net, is what I guess I can say. You know, that's a part of adulthood, is you have to live with the decisions that you make, and it's challenging, and you can be affected by them, and they can haunt you. You know, we have a really interesting story with Cal where he's faced with challenges that are difficult, and there's not necessarily any right answers. And it's something that I always really wanted to explore with the character. It was a conversation that we had immediately after the first game, was how do we put this character in situations that are challenging, and what are the ones that are really going to push him to the point where he might break? How do we get him to that point, and what do we do from there? And what is the story that will be the most exciting, and where we can still find adventure, but also find something that is deeper and darker and more intricate and complex. So yeah, I think that we have a bunch of really big questions that we're asking with this one. It's funny because it's this dual-sided thing, right? You have an established lore, character, canon, all this stuff, and you're so excited about it and you love it, but also at the end of the day, this needs to exist and be satisfying and interesting regardless of this, right? And you want to be able to have them interact with each other, and you know, have an interplay, but you also, it's always been important with me with our stories that the drama, the stakes, the characters should be clear regardless of whether or not you have any understanding of anything outside of it. And I want anybody who's never watched a Star Wars movie, read a Star Wars story, anything like that, to be able to jump into this and play it and still be able to understand it. And then if you do have you know, a more experienced understanding, then you're only going to have a deepened appreciation of a lot of what's going on here. And Lucasfilm were really generous in always adding input, explaining, and helping us kind of find our footing and where the story should be and where it should live. But yeah, it's always been really important to me to make sure that our story is satisfying on its own, and you know, stands on its own 2 feet, and that being the priority.
Hello there. This is where the fun begins. Hey there guys, Unofficial Star Wars here. Hope you're all doing well, and you guys just watched an exclusive interview of Kestis actor Cameron Monaghan with an interview from Game Informer. I will have that full video linked in the description of this video for you guys to check out there as well. There's a lot of interesting and important things that are teased at, I think, throughout this overall interview here, and for where we can see this overall character of Kestis going forward in the future of the Star Wars timeline. In this video, I also want to take a read from the direct article. I'm going to have their article linked in the description down below for you guys to check out there as well. As they read, the story for Star Wars Jedi Survivor will stay true to Star Wars canon while also working independently for players not familiar with the overall lore. Jedi Survivor is set to release on all platforms on March 17th for next generation consoles, continuing the story of Cameron Monaghan's Kestis 5 years after the events of the first game, Fallen Order. And since the release of Fallen Order, many fans have wondered if Cal will appear in any upcoming films or Disney Plus shows, just in live action in general, or if any of the characters throughout Star Wars would be appearing in the Survivor game as well. However, it seems though that Lucasfilm would like to keep the Jedi franchise separate from the time being, as it was recently revealed that Jedi Survivor is going to be accessible even to gamers who have never pressed play on a single Star Wars movie. In really the sense that it's just kind of its own thing, and that it's kind of like in the sense of comparing it to Andor. You didn't really have to watch any other shows or movies to completely understand it and be a diehard Star Wars fan. Now, in that interview with Game Informer that I had just shown at the beginning of this video, Kestis actor Cameron Monaghan talked about how the story of Star Wars Jedi Survivor would connect with canon of the Star Wars universe while also being able to stand on its own. Monaghan explained that the game will be conscious of the established lore of Star Wars, but the game's story needs to be satisfying and interesting regardless of the canon, saying that, in quote, "I think that we have a bunch of really big questions that we're all asking with this one. It's funny because it's this dual-sided thing, right? You have an established lore, character, canon, all that stuff, and you're so excited about it and you love it. But also, at the end of the day, this needs to exist and be satisfying and interesting regardless of this, right?" The actor did also state that certain events in the lore will interact with each other. However, at the same time, Cameron also revealed that someone who's never watched a Star Wars movie will be able to pick up the game and understand it. And to re-emphasize and quote back on what he said in that interview, and you want to be able to have them interact with each other and have an interplay, but you also, it's always been important with me, with our stories, that the drama, the stakes, the characters should be clear regardless of whether or not you have any understanding of anything outside of it. And I want anybody who's never watched a Star Wars movie, read a Star Wars story, anything like that, to be able to jump into this and play it and still be able to understand it. And fans won't have to worry though about the contents of the game not appealing to them. According to Cameron, if a player has a more experienced understanding of the Star Wars canon, then they'll have a deepened appreciation of what takes place. Really honestly similar, as I had mentioned previously before, to what we saw with the Andor show. Recalling back to that part of the interview saying, in quote, "And then you have to do a more experienced understanding, then you're only going to have a deepened appreciation of a lot of what's going on here." And Lucasfilm were really generous and always adding input, explaining and helping us find our footing, where the story should be and where it should live. As the article continues, at the end of the day, Cameron desires the story of Jedi Survivor to be satisfying on its own, and not be required to connect to anything throughout Star Wars to be considered on par. Saying that in quotes, "But yeah, it's always been really important to me, making sure that our story is satisfying on its own, and it stands on its own 2 feet, and that being the priority." Now, this all being said, the article goes on to talk about how the Force is balanced with Jedi Survivor. Just because there won't be an abundance of connections between Jedi Survivor and other Star Wars projects doesn't mean that it won't contain its fair share of Easter eggs and fan service at that as well. All Monaghan is saying is that the story will be able to work on its own. It doesn't rely on a film or a TV show in order to work, as a sequel essentially. Jedi Fallen Order worked the exact same way, and even though Darth Vader was included near the end of the game as a main boss even at that, players didn't have to know anything about Star Wars canon to understand what was exactly going on, because Darth Vader is, well, the face of Star Wars. You see Darth Vader and you know it's Darth Vader. Both Lucasfilm and Respawn Entertainment seems to be trying to offer the best experience possible to any player, whether or not you're a diehard Star Wars fan or if you're just a gamer. If the game is someone's introduction to the world of Star Wars, it appears they won't be out of the loop in the slightest. If someone picks up a controller who knows everything there is to know about a galaxy far, far away, they'll be likely rewarded for their knowledge with different Easter eggs and even fan service. From there, that is where the article concludes, and as I had mentioned at the beginning of this video, I have this article linked in the description down below for you guys to check out there as well. I want to know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. The whole idea of having fan service and that type of thing of connections to other Star Wars projects and media, whether it's shows or movies, is something interesting to talk about, I think, a lot, all the time, especially for when it comes to Cal Kestis appearing in live action somewhere in a Disney Plus show, as it's something a lot of Star Wars fans would love to see. Now, the last time we kind of talked about that whole idea, however, here on the channel, was what it seems like is that they really want to go ahead and pre-establish his character and his world at that there as well, and kind of finish out this whole gaming trilogy, essentially, before they bring this character to live action. Anyway, let me know what you all think about this one in the comment section down below. I would love to hear you guys all think. Of course, this has been Unofficial Star Wars. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. May the Force be with you as always. Peace out.